This house is being requisitioned by the British government.
My daughter and I will stay out of your way until we move to the camp. So I play Stefan Lubert, who's a German architect. Stefan lost almost everything during the war. To see Hamburg, the fall of 1945, the devastation, half the city was leveled, it was heartbreaking.
During the war, did you ever hope for a German victory?
I wanted to go back to how it was. I miss my wife. He lost, in a way, his daughter. She's very much kind of estranged now. She blames him for the death of her mother, Claudia.
Es ist jetzt Ihr Haus.
Du bist ein Feigling.
The Morgans were kind enough to let them stay. But it does create a lot of friction as well, especially between Stefan and Rachel. My wife died in the firestorm.
I'm so sorry. It's a really interesting relationship. You're in turmoil and you want to feel something other than the pain that you're in. And then there's somebody who understands.
I never thought that I could be happy like this.
There's a sort of micro and macro, and the story explores those through the triangle of relationships in the house between Lewis and Rachel, and then Rachel and Lubert.
Come with me. This is what you wanted.
Will we be all right?
Everything can start again.
Rachel.
Hello, Lewis.
Oh, look at you.
I play Rachael Morgan, an English woman who moves out to Hamburg, where her husband is trying to rebuild in the aftermath of the Second World War.
They're still finding bodies. It's chaos out there.
Lewis Morgan, he's a colonel in the British Army. She's coming over now to a different husband, who's a different man with a lot of unsettled business for her.
Colonel Morgan, welcome. Hey, Lubert. Please come inside. Let me show you the house.
He requisitions a house and he lets the owner, Herr Lubert, and his daughter remain. So you're in another heightened tense scenario of these people sharing this house.
You didn't tell me what I was walking into. This isn't how it was supposed to be.
None of this is how it is supposed to be.
Please don't go.
I had a job to do.
I've read a lot of World War II stories, and a lot of them are very black and white. This just went deeper. It's showing the horrors of war. My wife died in the firestorm.
I'm so sorry.
She came in with her idea of who these people were and what this country was and what they would be like, and then is suddenly having to confront the fact that there are people that have suffered such incredible loss. Definitely within the relationship with Lubert, it's, to begin with at least, simply a sexual need, but also that there's somebody who understands, as opposed to her husband who's shut down and not in any way give her the support that she needs.
How do you deal with that? You've grown separately with this massive big hole.
This film was inordinately ambitious. The storyline is in such a fresh arena.
It's an extraordinary moment. It's when the world's been absolutely laid flat in a way it never had before and hopefully never will again. We have this incredibly intimate and meaningful story about three individuals who've all lost, and the universal story of how it is that you repair yourself and move on in life.
I never thought that I could be happy like this.
I hope that when people see it, they're as moved as I was when I read the script. The kind of themes within the piece really stuck with me.
Come with me. This is what you wanted.
To new beginnings.
You're about to meet a strange people in a strange enemy country.
I didn't know anything about this particular part of history. I didn't know that there was an English occupation of Germany after the war.
We dropped more bombs on Hamburg and fell on London in the whole of the war.
It's been difficult.
For all of us.
1945 was an astonishing moment for Europe. It's beholden to us as filmmakers never to forget the most cataclysmic episode of the 20th century.
The inspiration comes directly from a family story. My grandfather, Walter, was stationed in Hamburg just after the war. He was the governor of a place called Pinneberg, just outside Hamburg. When I was pitching the story of the aftermath, I learned that Ridley Scott is the same age as my father and had a very similar experience of being a young boy in post-war Germany.
It completely recalled my childhood. My father was important in the army, and so he was seconded to the Allied forces in Germany.
This house is requisitioned for British use by order of the Control Commission, Germany.
The Brits basically requisitioned properties in order for their families to live in them when they came over, because they were going to be here reconstructing the country. And my grandfather, as governor, needed a house.
Es ist jetzt Ihr Haus. Aber wir haben uns.
Father said, what's going to happen to the German people, the German family? And they said, oh, well, they'll be put in a camp. And Father said, no, we will share the house with the German family.
You didn't tell me what I was walking into. I'm not comfortable with it.
Because they're Germans.
Now, it's difficult for people today to imagine just how strange almost that gesture was. There was a very visceral kind of hatred towards the Germans.
There may not be an outward show of hatred, but it's there below the surface.
For me, the actual story is that gesture of reconciliation, rebuilding, and generosity.
I wondered if you'd like to join me for breakfast. Both of you.
This movie probably wouldn't have been made without that gesture, because it sets up this extraordinary situation of two former enemies effectively living together.
If you're going to spy on a girl, the least you could do is pay her a compliment.
Yes, of course.
Seeing the set of the house was actually quite humbling, actually, for my dad, actually, to see that house and to see the care that goes into trying to create something that's authentic to the words on the page.
Please don't go.
I have a job to do.
I never thought that I could be happy like this.
We dropped more bombs on Hamburg and fell on London in the whole of the war.
It's been difficult. For you too, I expect.
For all of us.
Lewis Morgan, he's a colonel in the British Army. He's in charge of Hamburg, which is the British section of Germany when it was divided up after World War II.
It's chaos out there, Rachel. There's nowhere to put these people. There's nothing to feed these people.
This isn't how it was supposed to be.
None of this is how it is supposed to be. And yet here we are.
Lewis is busy rebuilding Hamburg. You're dealing with displaced people, refugees, starvation, the denazification of a whole people who've been brainwashed.
Heil Hitler.
He hasn't seen much of his wife during the past, couple of years as the war's raged on. He's a different man.
Please don't go.
I have a job to do.
His way of dealing with grief is to simply not talk about it, shut down, and not in any way give her the support that she needs, which pushes her into finding some solace somewhere else.
Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm losing my mind.
He's a bit of a war hero. So it was important that Jason had authority, a sort of alpha male quality, but also with a kind of gentle interior. Because you need to know that he loves Rachel. And I think Jason worked so brilliantly on that level.
At the heart of the aftermath is optimism. How does a husband and a wife find a way ahead? How does a world put themselves back together after this hatred?
Stay right there. And right here, folks, right here.
Same time, and he's changed it
You're like, what? Another period drop.
There you go.
Thank you.
Keira Knightley was the first to immediately she saw the victims of a woman and mother.
Thank you.
My screen is 1.2 bright, so it needs to be a little
This is a story of an English couple who were sent to Germany after the war, and they are entitled to requisition a house, but instead they decide to live with the German who owns the house, and the three of them go on a kind of very moving and sort of heartfelt story of love and redemption. I was very drawn to the fact that it's based on a true story of the author's grandfather, and that it has a very contemporary resonance about redemption and love and loss. I hope the audience thinks about it, what it means to love and forgive.
So this movie is about a woman, a British woman, who's invited to Hamburg at the end of the Second World War in the middle of Germany by her husband, and she comes hating Germans. And during the course of the movie, she grows to connect with the German people around her and to move in a rather amorous way towards a German man who's allowed to stay in the house that they're living in. So it's a movie about reconciliation, about forgiveness, and about compassion and rebuilding, reawakening again. I think what drew me to the project was that it had very profound qualities to it about what it is to be a human being, to be in love with a person you shouldn't be in love with, and to try and work on your marriage and see whether you can rescue your marriage, which is something obviously a very universal quality. And that felt to me like a very modern story. Wonderful in three different ways. Keira was very maternal, very connected to what it is to be a mother who's lost. Alex Skarsgård is like a gentle giant. He's like 6'3", he's built like a football player, but very gentle. And then Jason Clarke, who's from Australia, is much more rooted, much more grounded, a kind of much more alpha quality to him. So to work with these three actors in one movie was such a great privilege. But when Keira, there's a big scene at the piano, and I had my headphones on, and there was this kind of sound effect going on, ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. I thought, what is that? And the sound guy told me, it's her heartbeat going, ba-boom, ba-boom, ba-boom. And it was so fast that we took this heartbeat and we threaded it into the music score, and you hear this heartbeat during the film, but it's part of the music. You know, I want the audience to take away both an understanding of this unique era, the end of the Second World War and the beginning of the Cold War. Nobody knows anything about this moment, how generous the Americans and the British were to the defeated German people. And that's a story of forgiveness and compassion and reconciliation. And we need to work, all of us, both in America and in Britain, on those qualities that bring us nearer to other human beings and not judge them by their nationality or their color or their gender, but actually as other human beings.
It's set in the aftermath of, the direct aftermath of World War II, and it's a story, I think it's a story of how on earth you rebuild after great tragedy. So it's a love story, it's a love triangle, but it's really, I think at its core, a story of redemption and hope, because it asks the questions, how do you forgive your enemies? How do you move forward after the unimaginable kind of sort of almost apocalypse has happened? How on earth do you rebuild and carry on with your life? I mean, actually, this was one of the films that I've done that has been one of the loveliest films I've ever worked on. I think everybody was so lovely and so sort of committed to it, because I think it's a really interesting take. You know, there's been a lot of World War II films. I've certainly been in a number of World War II films, you know, but I've never seen something quite from this perspective, and telling that story of the direct aftermath of conflict. And I think we all just felt very passionate about that. So the process was, I hate to say it, very easy. I mean, I love them both. I've been really lucky. I've worked with Jason Clarke twice now, and I just love working with him. So that was a joy. And Alexander Skarsgård is one of the nicest men in the entire world. So that was a joy as well.
It's a love triangle set 6 months after the end of World War II in British-occupied Hamburg, Germany. And it's a story about how do you move after such a catastrophic event into forgiveness. And the love triangle that happens between a British woman that goes out to see her husband, who's a British officer, and starts falling in love with a German, is actually a symbol of that forgiveness. It's based on a true story, or partly based on a true story. The grandfather of the author of the book was a British officer in Hamburg at the time, and I think the story of forgiveness and when does a war really end is what drew me. I think the audience takes away this feeling of forgiveness and the feeling that rebuilding is possible, even after such a catastrophic event as the World War II, which was the defining event of the 20th century.